Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. A quarter-final preview for the US Open 2022 matchup between Carlos Alcaraz and Yannick Sinner. Arguably the most exciting quarterfinal out of them all, not just on the men's side, but the women's side as well, I have to say, because this is a highly anticipated match that everyone was looking at when the draw came out and said, hold on, Alcaraz and Sinner are in the same quarter. They could potentially meet. And now that we're getting it, I am extremely excited for it. We're going to break it down, of course, from three different points of view. The first one is going to be looking at the head-to-head between the two players, how they potentially played out, and then we will talk about tactically, so how the match might play out, and then we'll cater in what's happened in the past in those prior meetings and what might happen on the hard courts at or in the Arthur Ashe Stadium. On top of also then finally catering in their form at the US Open so far, how they've played, their run as well to this stage, and who maybe looks slightly better form-wise, if anyone does. Before we get into it, remember to that like button and subscribe if you're new, and also if you're a podcast listener or watcher, remember to leave a rating or review. Please do keep leaving ratings if you're especially listening or watching on Apple Podcasts or listening on Apple Podcasts. It helps us out a great deal. If you're watching on YouTube as well, go over to our podcast platforms and do leave a rating or review if you don't mind. It helps us out a great deal. Right, let's get into this. So, Carlos Alcaraz and Yannick Sinner. Alcaraz, the number 3 seed and number 4 in the world. Yannick Sinner, number 13 in the world. So they will be meeting in another matchup, a 5th edition of Sinner Alcaraz. Alcaraz Sinner, the head-to-head. What do you think the head-to-head is? It's 2-2. 2-2 going into this, but Sinner has won the last 2 matches. So Sinner won in Umag, which is a clay court tournament in Croatia in the final. He beat Alcaraz 6-7, 6-1, 6-1, which was a very good performance. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. But actually, we'll talk about it now. I mean, he just served, I think, since Wimbledon and maybe the start to middle of this year, he started serving a lot bigger and hitting his corners better as well. And I think the 2 matches that he lost to Alcaraz in 2021 and 2019, they're probably not reflective of the Sinner that's playing now. And he has made big improvements and leaps and bounds really in his, not just his career, but in his game and the way that he plays for sure. So that was an impressive victory over Alcaraz, like double breadstick at the end there, and just looked too strong, honestly. And then in Wimbledon, he took the first set 6-1, to the second 6-4, then lost the third 6-7, a 10-8 tiebreaker, which Alcaraz took, and then won the 4 sets 6-3. So in the end, just too strong for Alcaraz. Alcaraz beat Sinner, though, in Paris in 2021 on a hard court, winning in straight sets, and then also won in Alicante, if I'm not mistaken, in a challenger tournament, winning in 3 sets. Both got wild cards into that as well. So look, they're pretty good friends. They obviously talk about their rivalry and how much they kind of enjoy playing against each other and the challenge of playing each other. And it will be another one of those matchups which a lot of people like myself will be trying to break it down, trying to understand how it's going to play out, and whether we're going to get a very tight match between the two, or whether actually one of them will potentially run away with it. And you almost feel like all possibilities are possible at this stage, genuinely. So we'll get into this. But I think for me, the biggest question mark going into this was, if Alcaraz has to play Sinner, that's a big, big negative for him, because, for him, he would have looked at the draw and said, okay, well, hold on. Out of the people, the top seeds, right, who I need to beat to make the final and potentially win this thing, Djokovic is not available because of other reasons, of course, we know. And he has an elite backhand. And Alcaraz, which I'll go into in more detail, has an issue with players with elite backhand. So Djokovic is one player that, okay, he's not in the field. So that's a positive for him from a tennis perspective, right, in terms of his progressive ability in the tournament. Zverev is another elite backhand. He's not fit. He's not playing. Musetti, who beat Alcaraz on the clay recently, again, had an elite backhand, but not as good on the hard courts and lost in the end. Not he made a little bit of a run, but lost in the end, so didn't make his way into the quarterfinals. So obviously not going to be trouble for Alcaraz in any stretch. And Nadal, who's a lefty, so I guess you could just say, well, again, elite forehand, but is a lefty. He is now out because Tiafoe beat him. So all of those players out, those players would have caused Alcaraz problems. Whether they would have beaten him or not is a different story, but they would have given him issues for sure. Now, Sinner is the last player that I think really gives Alcaraz issues in sense of the backhand to backhand dynamic. Anyway, or is he? Because Nick Kyrgios is still in there. Nick Kyrgios is still in the draw. Now, is his backhand elite? Is the question. I'm not sure. If I'm being honest with you, I'm not sure. Not sure at all. But that's the question for another day. If Alcaraz does progress and they somehow meet, and I think it would be the final. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's stick to Alcaraz Sinner. So we talked about their head-to-head between the two matches. Sorry, their head-to-head between the two players. Obviously, 4 matches played. We've gone through them. Let's then go through their route to this stage, and then we'll talk about it from a tactical point of view, which I'm sure is what all of you want to listen and well, I hope you want to listen to it and watch it, and then you'll probably come back to me in the comments section when I'm completely wrong and say, you are wrong. And I'll say, I'm sorry, because it's a tough one to call, genuinely. But there are patterns of play, which I think we'll see, which have been pretty predominant or pretty prevalent, even in previous meetings. So I would be surprised if they don't prop up again or pop up again, if I can even speak properly, if they don't pop up again in this match. Alcaraz beat Baez in straight sets in the first round, then beat Correa in straight sets, beat Brooksby in straight sets, which was a really good win, I thought, because Brooksby had just, beaten some decent players on the way to that stage. And Alcaraz, coming through it. Then he had to face former US Open champion Marin Cilic and won in 5 sets under a closed roof. He was 2-1 up. Cilic came back in the 4th set, won at 6-4, then 6-3 in the 5th set. I mean, he won 6-4, 3-6, 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. I mean, that's 5 pretty tight sets. Kind of just all one break difference in every single one. I mean, it was an interesting match to watch, and Alcaraz not serving particularly big, only the 3 aces, and yeah, it was an intriguing one. 28 winners, 41 unforced errors, 45 winners for Cilic, 66 unforced errors. It wasn't the highest level of tennis played, and I think under the roof it does play slightly slower, if I'm not mistaken. So it can be a little bit of a grind at times. Alcaraz also had a similar match against Ivashka in his last one, but we'll touch upon that in a second. He had to play Altmaier in the first round, won in 5 sets, so that was a grinder. And it's interesting because I feel like for Sinner, he has quite a few first or second rounds where he has to win in 4 or 5 sets, and I'm not sure what the reason is behind that, but there must be something that explains why that's the case, or at least indicates why he may struggle early doors. And maybe it's just getting used to the crowd, the surface, or whatever. But obviously, he's playing matches in Cincinnati on a very similar surface, and also with the same balls. He would have practiced a lot. I'm not sure what it is, but it's something that I'm sure he'll be wanting to brush off, as he gets a little bit older and as he gets more experience, because it just takes a little bit out of him early doors. And then, yes, he's young enough, he's fit enough that it probably won't affect him down the stretch, but it will at some point, right, as he progresses in his career. So had to win in 5 sets and was 2-1 up and ended up then winning in 5, Altmaier making a little bit of a comeback there. Then also beat Eubanks in straight sets, good win there of the American, and Nakashima in 4, who is very dangerous. Nakashima beat Dimitrov in a good win in straight sets. And then Sinner had to beat Ivashka in 5. Again, was 2-1 up. Kind of didn't sleep in the 4th set, but lost at 6-4. And then won 6-3 in the final set, similar to Alcaraz against Cilic. So, look, I mean, very interesting couple of matches from both players, and playing against 2 pretty experienced operators who are not elite players, but they're dangerous players. And Sinner and Alcaraz coming through in the end. So where does that leave us in terms of how they're going to play against each other? Well, I think in terms of form-wise, they're in pretty similar form. And I think, going through the scorelines, going through the players they've played, that pretty much indicates that, right? That both players have, played some decent opposition. They've struggled at times, but generally they've come through relatively unscathed, you'd say. But both have played 5-setters, so it's an even playing field going into this match. Both have just come off the back of 2 5-setters. So the fitness, let's just completely put that to one side because I don't think that's going to be a factor. I think they'll both be fine. They're young, they're spry. They are very, very, they're just young. To be honest with you, young and hungry. From a tactical point of view, so I touched on it before, so we may as well, I guess, address that first, which is the backhand dynamic. And the backhand dynamic that I was talking about and mentioning, and I'm sure anyone who's watched my videos on Alcaraz or seen any analysis I've done on Alcaraz Sinner matchups is that Sinner causes Alcaraz problems and has done so recently because he has an elite backhand. Now, you might say, well, okay, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that Alcaraz, against, I would say, 95% of opposition on the ATP Tour, his backhand is good enough to not just be serviceable, but actually winning points and actually get him on the front foot against most players. But against, the 5% that I was talking about, maybe even less, it can almost be a little bit of a liability. And not liability in the sense that, we're not talking about a backhand that is completely, has absolutely zero penetration to the court. We're talking about a backhand that just not quite good enough against the elite backhanders and defensively can be exposed at times on the stretch when he's rushed as well. And a good example of that is Yannick Sinner at Wimbledon. Now, of course, those courts are slightly quicker than the US Open. The balls bounce lower, so it was even more exaggerated. But Sinner was going, backhand cross into out with the forehand into the backhand of Alcaraz, and Alcaraz was struggling. I mean, Sinner was hammering his backhand side, not just with depth, but with angles as well. Alcaraz stretching, hitting a lot of open stance backhands, which were going short. Sinner would then just eat them up. Or what ended up happening in that match is Alcaraz had to end up slicing a lot because he was so rushed on the backhand side. And he ended up slicing a lot, and Sinner's footwork was sublime, managed to run around a lot of the backhand slices and punish him with the into-out forehand and really grind him down. So that was a pattern of play that definitely developed in that match. And it was one that Alcaraz consistently came out second best in. And that definitely contributed, of course, to him losing. Then if we fast forward to Umag, it was a similar story. Now on the clay, it's probably a bit less exaggerated, but Sinner he actually ended up winning the forehand to forehand exchanges more because both players were kind of a bit happier, I guess, to trade forehands because it's not as quick a surface, it's a slower surface. And Sinner managed to actually, for the most part, outpower the Alcaraz forehand, outmaneuver him on the forehand side. That would have been worrying to Alcaraz because Alcaraz's forehand is elite. It's a forehand that, a lot of people have compared to Nadal, to Federer. And the reason you might think Nadal Federer is very different, but it's because he's got different looks on his forehand. He can hit the forehand similar to Federer in front of him, flat, very, elegant, I guess, and very simple in its execution. He can also whip it and hit a buggy whip forehand with higher topspin, with more coverage over the net. So there's a couple of ways that he can hit the forehand, and that's why he's compared to both. But he was getting outclassed really by Sinner in the Umag final in the forehand to forehand exchange. In the backhand to backhand, we don't really need to talk about it because I've mentioned it. And then he also struggled against Musetti, who I name dropped earlier, lost to him in a final as well, in a clay court tournament final. And again, it was because the backhand to backhand exchanges, Musetti was eating him up. Genuinely, like it was just that's the case. And I'm not trying to say it in a way that Alcaraz has a terrible backhand. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying against the guys who have elite backhands, he struggled. And who else did he lose to that I mentioned in that group of players? Well, Alexander Zverev at Roland Garros. Elite backhand, beat him. A surprise? I think not. Coincidence? I think not. Novak Djokovic obviously had a really close match with Alcaraz in the clay court swing, but hasn't played him much this year. So if you played him on a hard court, I think we're talking about a different story. But either way, look, Alcaraz is a phenomenal talent. But when we're talking about it from a tactical standpoint, that's something that Sinner will look to again exploit in this matchup. Now Alcaraz can look at it two different ways. He can either say, okay, I'm going to back my backhand slice. And if I feel like I'm not just going to hit it when I'm feeling rushed. I'm going to try and attack with the backhand slice, hit it low of the net with high pace. I'm not quite sure that Alcaraz has that in the lock. I don't think he has a Federer or Berrettini type slice. I think his slice is okay. It's not particularly special. It's not an attacking slice, one that really you think, oh, hold on, that it can really hurt me. Or he says, okay, I'm going to try and go backhand to backhand with Sinner, which is a mistake, I think, personally. He could, or he could say, okay, I'm going to try and run around my backhand as much as possible, try and hit forehand. Sinner won't let him, though, because he'll find great angles on the backhand. So then the question arises, well, what do you do? Because in the forehand to forehand exchanges, he lost to Sinner in Umag, right? He came out second best. So what does Alcaraz do? There's a couple of things he can do. In the backhand to backhand exchanges, if he wants to try and get out of them, I think how he gets hurt in those exchanges is not just depth. I think the biggest issue is the width and getting dragged out and feeling uncomfortable. I think as soon as he thinks, okay, Sinner, next shot or the second shot after that is probably like he's starting to grind me down. He's probably going to be able to find an angle and really push me on the backhand side. Early doors in that rally, he should go hard down the middle. That's my opinion. He could go up the line and change it. I think that's not a bad shout. The only issue is obviously if you go up the line, you got to make sure you nail it because the forehand of Sinner, all he has to do is flick it cross court and Alcaraz is out of position and he flicks it cross court with enough angle. It's going to be a really difficult point for Alcaraz. He's a great defender generally and he defends really well to his forehand side though, better than his backhand side to be fair. But even then it will be a difficult proposition. So if he's going to go down the line, it needs to be at the right times. And with enough purpose that it's deep enough, it's got enough pace on it through the court that Sinner can't hurt him then with the forehand cross or the forehand on the line in response. So that's an important point to note. So if he can't access that, then he should go down the middle hard, go deep and hard down the middle of the court, get himself back into some sort of, like neutral standing because in the backhand to backhand rallies, he's not in neutral. And also it avoids Sinner being able to hit angles more readily and more easily. So what does that then mean? Well, it means I think if he goes down the middle hard with the backhand, or even with the into that forehand, then it just means that he'll be able to most likely hit a forehand the next ball after that. Because Sinner will get it back into play, but he's got less angle to work with. So if Alcaraz's footwork is neat enough, he can then make it into a forehand. And that's when then he can start stepping in and trying to dictate with the forehand side. Now, the issue he's going to have is, of course, that if he goes into one of the forehands, Sinner hits some incredible running forehands in Umag. So he's going to have to be, again, a little bit creative. And I think what Alcaraz should do is try and come to the net more than maybe he has done in other matches this week. And the reason why I say that is because I just feel like from the back of the court, recently anyway, Sinner's had his number a little bit. And I think, Alcaraz is someone who has diversity, has variety to his game, more so than probably a Sinner. So why not utilize it? And that means coming to the net a bit more. If he gets anything short from Sinner, then try to come forward, like try to have that intention to come forward, hit a good approach. I don't see why, he shouldn't also as well try and utilize the slice approaches as well if he can hit it well enough. It just gives Sinner less pace to work with to pass him either side. He could get lobbed a couple of times, could get passed a couple of times, but I think he needs to utilize that. He's got great hands in the net. The other thing he tried to do, of course, in the past is try and drop shot Sinner. Now, Sinner is so good at getting to drop shots, as we saw in Umag. He can utilize it, but he needs to do it at the right times. And that does mean, utilizing it when the right time does present itself. For example, I guess using it as almost like a last resort or as like a desperate ploy is not the right time to do it. When you're 2 meters behind the baseline, probably isn't either. I think he needs to try and drag Sinner around the court And then it needs to be more of a finishing or a penultimate shot where he kind of plays it, comes to the net, and then okay, he needs to finish it off with a volley maybe, but maybe he doesn't. Maybe the drop shot's good enough because he's pushed Sinner back so far. So needs to be patient with the drop shot. He's got a very good one, but needs to utilize it at the right times. For Yannick Sinner, there's a few things. I mean, he just needs to be on the front foot, I think. He needs to try and drag Alcaraz out. If he can get into the backhand to backhand exchanges, he'll be happy with that. He won't slice a lot, I don't think. I don't think either. I think Alcaraz will have to slice more than Sinner, honestly. But the forehand to forehand exchanges, he had a lot of success in the Umag, so he'll take a lot of confidence from that. Obviously, it's a different surface, it's quicker. So Alcaraz should be able to then, just close the gap a little bit in ground stroke rallies for sure. And I think Alcaraz also enjoys the US Open courts. He made the semis last year, of course. Quarterfinals last year, and had to pull out because of an injury against Felix. So he's got good memories here. He clearly knows how to play on the surface. He should have some success in those rallies. And I think the biggest thing for me for Alcaraz is he's got to be aggressive. And I know he's generally got an aggressive game, but he makes a lot of errors anyways because he's trying to be, attacking. Just make sure that for him, I would say he needs to make sure he's flattening out the backhand and the forehand when he can, when he has the opportunity to. If he's going to hit high topspin balls, then try to use angles, try to drag Sinner out, and try and kill him with depth, because that's what Sinner, I think, did to Alcaraz a lot. He killed him with depth a lot, especially to the backhand side, and Alcaraz's backhand didn't hold up when Sinner was going very deep into that corner. So Alcaraz needs to try and do the same. Try and keep Sinner at bay in the rallies, and try and dictate when he can. For Sinner, if he serves well as well, like he has done so recently against Alcaraz, hits his spots, will Alcaraz be able to combat that? Because he played against Cilic, who's a big server, struggled like I thought I said he would. Like I thought he would a little bit. And Sinner, isn't as big a server as Cilic, but he's big enough and hits his corners enough that he'll cause Alcaraz some problems. So Alcaraz needs to be very much on his game when it comes to returning. He needs to try and pick up patterns and also anticipate better. It'll be interesting to see whether he's able to make big inroads into the Sinner serve, because I think with Sinner, I think he will make inroads in the Alcaraz serve, because Alcaraz's serve, unlike Sinner's, which has improved a lot in the last couple of years, I don't think it's really improved much. He's added some pace to it, but really his placement at times leaves a lot to be desired. So if Sinner is standing far back, which I don't think he will be, then he can come to serve and volley. But I don't think it's a tactic he should be using a lot. He should be trying to come to the net, but at the right moments, not just forcing the issue, I guess, against Sinner, because then you can look silly for sure. Sinner will also go into the back end of Alcaraz for the return, which is pretty natural. For Sinner, he doesn't really have a weakness either forehand or backhand. They're both pretty damn solid. The question mark is just going to be, can Sinner carry on this good winning streak against Alcaraz? And we shall see. But if Alcaraz returns well and he's patient in the rallies and he's able to tactically outmaneuver Sinner, then, he could definitely win. But I think Sinner goes into this a slight favorite because of the recent matches, because of, as I said, the fact that he's got an elite backhand. He causes Alcaraz a lot of issues. But the hard courts, the slightly faster courts, suit Alcaraz's game more. The fact that, yes, it's not quite as fast as Wimbledon, but it's fast enough, and also you've got that slightly higher bounce. That should suit Alcaraz. But yeah, I think he needs to come to the net, rush him when he can, make Sinner feel uncomfortable. For Sinner, he'll be looking to grind him down from the back and really get him second guessing and doubting himself in the backhand to backhand exchanges for sure. So it's an intriguing matchup. It really is. My prediction is, do I go Yannick Sinner to repeat, or do I go Alcaraz to get revenge? I'm going to go Alcaraz in 5 sets. Alcaraz in 5 sets. But I don't know. It could easily be Sinner in 5 sets. Genuinely, it really could be. I think it may even come down to who serves better on the day, genuinely, because I think it's going to be pretty tight from the back of the court. And even though Alcaraz may lose some of the forehand to forehand exchanges, for the most part, I think he's going to win those and come out on top. So let's see how we get on. I think it's going to be an incredible match. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you very much.